When retirement came knocking on my door, I thought I'd spend my golden years gardening, fixing up little projects in the garage, and maybe watching ball games with my grandkids. But after nearly 3 decades as a police officer, I learned one thing: quiet doesn't always mean peaceful. Sometimes you need a little adventure to keep the heart pumping. So, when my buddies from the department, Dan, Mike, and Tony suggested we take an old-fashioned boys' trip across the country in an RV, I didn't hesitate. "Let's do it," I said, grinning like I was 25 again. Dan was our planner, Mike was our comedian, and Tony, well, Tony was the one who made sure none of us forgot our meds or wallets. We'd all served together in the force, watched each other's backs in the toughest of times, and now in retirement. We were ready to enjoy life. The RV was no luxury bus, but she had character. Faded blue paint, squeaky cabinets, and a faint smell of coffee permanently brewed into the walls. We loved it. For us, it was freedom on wheels. We loaded it with coolers, fishing poles, guitars, and enough snacks to feed a small army. The plan was simple: head toward the mountains, stop wherever we felt like it, and just enjoy the open road. The first 2 days were filled with laughter, old stories, and more than a few bad jokes. Mike had everyone in stitches, doing impressions of the rookie cops we used to train. Tony strummed his guitar when we parked for the night, and I swear the sound of those strings echoing under the stars was worth the whole trip. But peace never lasts long when life decides to throw in a little drama. It happened when we pulled into a small-town RV park just outside of a scenic trailhead. The place was quiet, family-friendly, with a few campers set up around the lot. We parked, stretched our legs, and set up a small fire pit. Nothing loud, nothing crazy. Just for old cops enjoying a campfire and a few sodas while. It's talking about the good old days. That's when she showed up. Her name was Karen, though, of course. We didn't know it yet. She marched toward us with that unmistakable swagger of entitlement, clutching a little dog in one hand and her cell phone in the other. Her eyes narrowed the second she saw us laughing around the fire. "Excuse me?" she barked. "You can't just park here and start carrying on like this." We all turned, a little stunned by her sudden hostility. Dan, ever the peacemaker, smiled politely. "Ma'am, we paid for the spot. Got the permit right here." He held up the receipt from the office. Karen didn't even glance at it. "That doesn't matter. I live nearby, and this is a quiet park." "You're being disruptive." Mike chuckled softly. "Disruptive? We're just telling stories, lady. We haven't even cracked open a beer that set her off like a firecracker." She puffed up her chest and pointed her finger at us. "Don't you talk back to me. I know troublemakers when I see them. I'm calling the police." The 4 of us exchanged glances. I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. The irony was too rich. She was threatening to call the police on 4 retired officers who had probably logged more hours in a squad car than she had in her entire neighborhood watch meetings combined. "Ma'am," Tony said calmly, "that's not necessary. We're just here to relax. Why don't you join us? Fire's warm, and we've got extra chairs." She gasped, like he'd suggested something scandalous. "Absolutely not. I don't sit with strangers, and you all look suspicious. I'm calling right now." Sure enough, she dialed 911 right there in front of us, her voice shrill as she reported, "Yes, there are 4 men in an RV causing a disturbance, possibly drinking, and they look dangerous." We all sat there in stunned silence as she gave the dispatcher our description. Don finally muttered under his breath, "Well, this is going to be interesting." When she hung up, she smirked triumphantly. "You'll be out of here in no time. I know the police chief personally." That was the moment we couldn't hold it in any longer. Mike burst out laughing, nearly tipping over his chair. "Lady," he said between chuckles, "you might want to sit down for what's about to happen." She frowned, confused. "What are you talking about?" I leaned forward, locking eyes with her. "We're not troublemakers, ma'am. We're cops. Retired, sure, but we wore the badge for decades. You just called the department on some of their old friends." Her face went pale as the sound of sirens began to faintly echo in the distance. The boys and I exchanged a knowing look. This was about to get real entertaining. The distant wail of sirens grew louder, bouncing off the quiet RV park and cutting through the night like an alarm bell. Karen folded her arms smugly, standing there like a queen who had just summoned her knights. "You boys are about to be in real trouble," she sneered, her little dog yapping as if to back her up. Mike whispered with a grin, "Bet you $5 it's Jenkins." Tony shook his head. "Nah, Jenkins retired last year. My money's on Ramirez. He's still patrolling these parts." Sure enough, a pair of squad cars rolled in. Lights flashing, but sirens fading as they pulled up near our spot. Out stepped Officer Ramirez, just as Tony predicted, broad shoulders, salt and pepper hair, and a face that lit up the second he spotted us. "Would you look at this?" Ramirez laughed, striding toward us. "If it isn't the 4 horsemen of the precinct? What are you old-timers doing out here?" Karen's smugness evaporated. "Wait, what?" she stammered, glancing from us to Ramirez. Don stood, shaking Ramirez's hand like they were long-lost brothers. "Boys' trip, Ramirez. Just stretching the legs before we hit the trail tomorrow." Mike leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. Apparently, we were disturbing the peace. Karen's jaw dropped. "You know them?" she demanded. Ramirez gave her a puzzled look. "Know them? Lady, these men trained half the department. I learned traffic stops from this guy right here," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "What's going on?" Karen's voice wobbled as she tried to regain control. "They were being loud and suspicious. I live nearby, and I know the rules of this park." Ramirez cut her off, his voice firm but polite. "Ma'am, they're not breaking any laws. They paid for their spot, and I know these men. Trust me, they're the last people you need to worry about." She shook her head furiously. No, you're wrong. They must be up to something. Look at them sitting around a fire like some gang members." At that, Tony burst out laughing so hard he had to wipe tears from his eyes. "Gang members? Ma'am, the closest we come to a gang is the donut shop on Main Street." Even Ramirez chuckled at that. The tension was cracking, though Karen didn't want to let it go. She planted her feet and raised her voice. "I demand you do something. Arrest them, or at least make them leave." Ramirez's expression shifted professional, serious, the way we'd all seen 100 times on duty. "Ma'am, filing false reports and misusing 911 is a crime. These men aren't breaking the law, and if you keep this up, you're the one who might end up in the back of my car tonight." The color drained from her face. "What? That's outrageous." "I was only trying to protect the community." "From 4 retired cops sitting around a campfire?" Mike asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. I leaned forward, deciding to throw her one last lifeline. "Listen, ma'am, we're not your enemies. We've spent our lives protecting people, even the ones who didn't like us. If you just sit down and relax, you might find we're decent company." For a moment, I thought she might take the offer. Her lips trembled, her eyes darted to the ground. But then pride won out. She huffed, grabbed her dog tighter, and muttered, "This isn't over," before stomping back toward her RV. The park was silent except for the crackle of our fire. Ramirez shook his head, chuckling. "You guys sure know how to attract trouble, even in retirement." Dan shrugged. "Some things never change." Ramirez stayed a while, catching up and swapping stories with us. He even joined in on one of Mike's bad jokes, the kind that only cops could laugh at after years on the job. Eventually, he headed back to his cruiser, giving us a wave. But as the night settled back into peace, I noticed Karen's RV across the lot, her blinds twitching like she was peeking out every few minutes. Something told me she wasn't finished, not by a long shot, and I was right. Because the very next morning, Karen escalated in a way none of us expected. Morning sunlight spilled across the campground, warming the RV and stirring the smell of coffee that Tony had already brewed. I stepped outside, stretched my back, and breathed in that crisp mountain air. It felt like freedom. Birds were chirping. Kids were riding bikes around the lot, and for a moment, the memory of last night's drama with Karen felt like a bad dream. But peace never lasts long when pride and entitlement are involved. As we sat around the picnic table with mugs in hand, we noticed movement by Karen's RV. She was standing there with her phone, pacing like she was planning a chess match against invisible opponents. Then, just as Mike bit into a breakfast sandwich, we heard her voice echo across the lot. "You people need to wake up," she shouted, waving her phone. "These men are dangerous. I tried to warn you last night, but nobody listens." Heads turned. Families peeked out from their campers, looking more annoyed than alarmed. A couple of kids laughed, thinking it was all some kind of performance. Dan groaned and muttered, "Here we go again." Karen marched toward the camp office, her little dog yapping at her heels. Within minutes, the park manager, a tired-looking man named Bill with a coffee stain on his polo shirt, trudged over to our site. "Morning, fellas," Bill said, scratching his head. "I got a complaint again. Apparently, your dangerous individuals who scared the residents last night." Mike nearly spit out his coffee, laughing. "Dangerous? Bill, the only thing dangerous about us is my cholesterol level." Bill cracked a small smile but looked uneasy. "Look, I don't doubt you guys are fine, but she's loud, persistent, and frankly, she's scaring the other guests more than you are. If this keeps up, I'll have to ask her to leave. Just thought you should know." "Appreciate it, Bill," I said, trying to keep things calm. "We'll stay out of trouble. She's the one stirring the pot." As Bill walked off, Karen's voice rose again, this time calling someone else. "Yes, Channel 5 News. I have a scoop for you. A gang of armed men are terrorizing this campground, and the police are covering for them." Our jaws dropped. "Did she just Tony started?" "Yep," I cut him off. "She's calling the media now." Sure enough, by mid-morning, a news van pulled up at the edge of the lot. Out stepped a young reporter and her cameraman, looking around like they'd stumbled into the scene of a crime drama. Karen scurried toward them, waving frantically. "There. Over there," she cried, pointing at us. "That's them. They're criminals, pretending to be police officers. Dangerous men." The reporter, clearly skeptical, approached us. "Gentlemen, would you like to respond to these allegations?" Mike leaned back in his chair, smirking. "Sure, name's Officer Michael Harris, 25 years on the force, retired last spring. That's Dan Detective for 30 years. Tony, Patrol Sergeant. And this, here is Jack, my captain for half my career." He raised his coffee like it was a toast. The reporter blinked, caught off guard. "Wait, you're all retired police officers?" "That's right," I said. "She's got her facts wrong. We're just here on vacation, not running a crime ring." Karen's face turned crimson. "Don't listen to them. They're lying. Anyone can say they're cops." That's when Ramirez returned, pulling up in his cruiser just as the camera started rolling. He stepped out, walked right up to us, and gave me a hearty handshake. "Morning, gentlemen. Hope you slept well." The reporter looked like her entire story had just crumbled. "Officer, can you confirm these men are who they say they are?" Ramirez smiled for the camera. "Not only can I confirm it, I'd trust these men with my life. They're some of the finest officers I've ever known." Karen's shriek could have shattered glass. "This is corruption. You're all in on it." She stomped her foot, clutching her little dog so tightly it yelped. At that point, the crowd of campers started murmuring. Some rolled their eyes. A dad whispered to his kid that ladies lost it. The reporter tried to salvage the moment. But it was clear the story was dead. She wrapped up quickly. Muttering something about miscommunication, and the news crew packed up, Karen stood frozen. Her plan backfired, her credibility gone. But as she stormed off, she hissed at us, "You haven't seen the last of me. I'll make sure you regret ever coming here." We all exchanged looks. It wasn't fear in our eyes, it was exasperation mixed with a little humor. Because at that point, Karen wasn't a threat. She was just a storm cloud that refused to blow over. Still, none of us expected just how far she'd go to try and get the last word. By the third day, the campground felt more like a stage, and we were the unwilling stars of Karen's drama. The other campers avoided her, shaking their heads whenever she stomped past with her little dog, muttering about conspiracies. We figured she'd eventually burn herself out. But Karen wasn't the kind to quit. She was the kind to double down. That morning, As the sun climbed high and the scent of bacon filled the air, Karen pulled her boldest stunt yet. We were cleaning up after breakfast when a convoy rolled into the Park 3. Patrol cars and even a sheriff's SUV, lights flashing, sirens off, but the kind of arrival that makes everyone stop what they're doing. Kids froze with their bikes mid-turn, campers peered from behind curtains, and even Bill the manager looked ready to faint, and there she was, Karen standing proudly at the entrance with her arms crossed like she had orchestrated the entire operation. She pointed toward us, her voice ringing out, "That's them. Those are the imposters. Arrest them immediately before it's too late." I sighed. "Well, boys, guess we're about to have a reunion." Out stepped Sheriff Dalton, a man we all knew well. Barrel-chested, deep-voiced, and not easily rattled. The second he saw us, his stern expression melted into a grin. "Well, I'll be damned. If it isn't Captain Jack and his merry band, what's this circus about?" Karen's jaw dropped. You know them?" "Of course I do," Dalton said, striding over to shake my hand. "This man trained me back when I was a rookie. And these three? Some of the finest officers I've worked alongside." The crowd of campers erupted into laughter, clapping and cheering like they were watching the climax of a comedy show. Even the kids joined in, chanting, "Cops, cops, cops." Karen's face turned the color of a ripe tomato. No, you're all lying. This is corruption on a massive scale. I'll go higher. I'll contact the governor if I have to." Dalton raised a hand, his patience clearly worn thin. "Ma'am, that's enough. You've wasted police resources, disrupted this campground, slandered good men who've served their community for decades. If you make one more false report, you're looking at charges. Do you understand?" Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. For once, she had no words. Finally, clutching her dog to her chest, she let out a frustrated shriek and stormed back to her RV. The blinds snapped shut, and for the rest of the trip, she didn't utter a single word in our direction. The tension broke instantly. Campers walked over, patting us on the back, offering us extra marshmallows for the fire. One older gentleman saluted me, saying softly, "Thank you for your service." Boys, it hit me right in the chest, and I had to swallow the lump in my throat that night. As the fire crackled and Tony strummed his guitar, we reflected on what had happened. "You know," Mike said, sipping his soda, "back in the day, we dealt with bank robbers, gangsters, and car chases. Who would have thought our biggest challenge in retirement would be Karen?" We all laughed, the sound carrying into the cool night air. But then I grew serious, looking at my brothers in arms. We handled worse, sure, but this reminded me of something important. Doesn't matter how old we get or where we go, people are always going to need patience, understanding, and sometimes a little tough love. And that's what being a cop was always about. Don nodded. And now, it's about enjoying moments like this. The stars glittered above us, and the campground was peaceful again. No sirens, no shouting, just the quiet hum of nature and the bond of four old cops who had each other's backs. Karen never bothered us again. Though rumor had it, Bill eventually asked her to leave the park permanently. Something about creating an unsafe environment for other guests. Fitting, if you ask me. As we packed up the RV at the end of the trip, Tony slapped the side of the vehicle and grinned. "Well, fellas, what's next?" "Desert, coast. Maybe we'll run into another Karen and give the next sheriff a laugh." I chuckled, climbing into the driver's seat. "Whatever's next, boys, we'll face it together, just like always." With that, we hit the road, Ag and older, wiser, still laughing, and carrying the unshakable bond of brothers who had served their city and earned their peace. And no Karen, no false report. Storm cloud could take that away. The open road stretched before us, and for once, it truly felt like freedom.